Okay. We now have the presentation from Florida Atlantic. And thank you for being here, and look forward to the presentation.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to the Board of Governors and tell you what's going on at FAU and some of our plans for the future. I'm joined here today by the chair of our board, Mr. Robert Stilley, and by another board member and alumnus, Mr. Tom Workman, and by my provost, Dr. Brenda Claiborne. I thought what I would start with was an understanding. We talk about the different missions and the different unique makeup of the universities in the system, and to give you an idea of FAU's students and how they compare to students in the rest of the system. We are the second largest in part-time undergraduate enrollment, and I think that's going to be a factor that you'll see as we look at things like graduation rates, as many of our students who even start as full-time become part-time students as they go through their career at the university. We also are first in the oldest population of undergraduate students, and I think that speaks well to our service to the working adult in our urban communities that we serve, and I think is part of the mission of public higher education to bring those students back into higher ed and give them a great education. We're second in the state with both Hispanic undergraduates and African American undergraduates, with FIU and FAMU being first in those two categories, but which gives us a wonderfully diverse mix of undergraduate students that we're very, very proud of. And finally, our efficiency, we're fourth in the state for the amount of baccalaureate degrees that we give per funding from the state. And I think, again, that speaks to our efficiency and also our great partnering with our local state colleges for serving transfer students. Another thing that I think is important to remember as we talk about this great state of Florida is the size of the regions that we serve by the different universities. We have over 3.6 million people in our service area, mostly concentrated in Broward and Palm Beach County. And to put that in perspective, that's larger than 21 states. And that makes us a size of the state of Connecticut or Oregon. We would fit right in between there with size of population we serve. So as we talk about aspirational goals for our university, I think if you put it in the context of that size citizenry, you see that our goals are appropriate for the citizens we serve. We had a recently approved strategic plan by our Board of Trustees that we're very proud of, and it does align with the SUS goals. When we look at enriching the educational experience, I think you'll see that we're talking about more STEM degrees, we're talking about undergraduate research experiences, we're talking about improving our graduation and retention rates, and we're talking about increasing our honors programming within the entire university. The research, scholarship, and creative activity, that was a prime initiative of the university. We've been given something that no other university in America has been given in the wonderful partnerships that we have been provided in Palm Beach County with the addition of Scripps and Max Planck and Torrey Pines and Vaccine Gene Therapy Institute, and also the addition to the University of Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. So our potential for partnership and growth in research is there. Community engagement, we're really defining that as working with our business community, of understanding the talent and skills that they need from our graduates and helping them to attract businesses to the area and grow our entrepreneurial activities around the university too. Of course, we want to be good stewards of the investment the state has made in us and be able to use our IT, physical, and human resources to the best way possible. One of the things that was part and key of our strategic planning was really focusing our mission. And I talk about this as the power of place. What do we have at Florida Atlantic University that has been outstanding in the past and an area we can grow and excel and be tops not only in Florida and the nation and the world? We sit on 150 miles of the most beautiful coastline in the world, and so marine and coastal issues are clearly something our university should foster and grow in. We have the first ocean engineering PhD program in the country, a good focus for growth of graduate programming. I mentioned before we have Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. Our marine and coastal issues are one that we want to talk about policy, we want to talk about history, we want to talk about city planning. It's greater than just the science involved in that. Biotechnology, again with that wonderful investment of the state in those biotech giants right on our Jupiter campus, is one that we can't miss that opportunity. And the last one, contemporary societal challenges. Sometimes I like to call this Florida First. We lead the country in things that we need to have our universities at the table discussing. Everything from climate change to foreclosure crisis to healthy aging to cyberbullying to cyber protection of our internet. These are things that we have leading faculty in, and we see this as something that we can build and be a leader across the country in. This slide was supposed to be a combination of things that we have as strengths at this point, but which also present challenges to us that we need investment in. You know we have the newest medical school in the system. We're very, very proud of that. We've already seen a tremendous impact in our community on the growth of academic medicine and partnering with the university on that. I've mentioned before that destination for biotechnology. That's going to require investment for us and our faculty and our infrastructure to be full partners. We really want to be part of the entrepreneurial business community and match up our internship possibilities, match up our graduate and undergraduate training to the opportunities. And finally, you know, especially with that adult returning population, we really do need to focus on distance education, and we have lagged behind the rest of the system, and that will require us to make an investment. So again, matching up with the top, building our medical school, we really want to invest in that and make it a strong academic medicine school. Continue to serve all our communities in our region. As you'll see when we talk about our efficiencies, we had some very drastic decisions to make, and you'll see that we have talked about and voted on eliminating some of our physical presence in some of the communities that we serve. That's going to require a different kind of outreach to the citizens in those counties. Academic advising and career counseling to enhance job placement. I think you might have seen that the chair of our board has written several editorials talking about higher education as an investment. And one of the things that our students need to do if they're making that investment is think about the long-term return. We know that they'll return in overall average of ability to spend, earning power, part of the state's economic climate, but there are differences in majors and how to have students recognize what majors they'll take that will lead to job placement in the area. Of course, recruiting our high-quality faculty if we want to follow along the doubling track that the board has set for doubling our research profile, bringing those federal dollars into the state and to our region. And again, as I mentioned before, an expansion of e-learning. Our key initiatives are around those signature themes. We're very proud that we're focusing our academic mission to something we think is appropriate for Florida Atlantic University and going into the future with that. Secondly, we're in our SACS 10-year accreditation year, and one of the things they require is a quality enhancement plan. And we're very glad that out of all the applicants for that, we chose distinction through discovery, increasing honors education and undergraduate research, which we think will help with attracting better students, helping to retain those students, and taking advantage of a university education, which means that our faculty are doing scholarship and research. And finally, a full partner in economic development initiatives. This has been a push of my Board of Trustees. I think in one short year we made a lot of advance in this. We were recently recognized by the Boca Chamber as the Business of the Year, the first time we were so recognized, even though we've been 50 years in that community. I'm
I
going to
think
show
the
you a short
cross-section
clip
of
here.
the business community that it brings in, not only service providers and professionals, but real investors, folks that are really in the trenches writing checks, and you get kind of a critical mass of that specific population, not only observing, but really involved at many levels of the process as coaches, as judges. I think it's an incredible opportunity, not only for the students, but for FAU.
And they also offer one-on-one mentoring with different people in the community, people with really tremendous backgrounds that are willing to just sit there with you and if you have specific questions, answer your questions, but to really give you a framework for your business plan and help you to implement that into a solid business in the future.
There's not anywhere else that I know of or anything else that I've ever experienced where I can take my idea that I think is viable and present it to people whose opinions really can make a difference.
That was an example of our business plan competition that we have that is local entrepreneurs, our own students, and this year we reached down into high school students to allow them to get a head start in starting a business. Operational efficiencies. This is one where I believe and our board believes that we have taken the budget reduction we're faced with and made some decisions that will affect the university for years to come, but which were major, very difficult decisions to make. We have proposed suspending operations on 3 of our campuses, Port St. Lucie, downtown Fort Lauderdale, and turning our Dania Beach facility into a research-funded facility that does not use E&G funding. These were very difficult decisions to make. We've been proud of the fact that we sit in all those communities. We realized that if we wanted to keep our academic programs strong, we had to eliminate administrative overhead. I will say that it's easy to use those terms, administrative overhead, but administrative overhead is people too. And this led to layoffs and closure of and layoffs of people in these particular areas. We're maintaining our degree programs through consolidation. We have implemented optimum class size both to reflect pedagogy and to enhance revenue generation from those classes. We have we have a soft freeze on hiring, only hiring that are in essential positions. We've reduced administrative positions. I personally have eliminated 3 vice presidential positions from my staff. We have merged units. Going forward, we're looking at 12-month contracts being changed to 9 or 10-month contracts. We have completed the outsourcing of all our custodial and maintenance services. You know we have delayed maintenance because we had no PICO funding the last 2 years. We're delaying that. We have many shared service agreements, which we're increasing. We're maximizing our space utilization on our remaining campuses. And we, of course, like all the other institutions, have a program to eliminate low enrollment programs as we go forward. I think that if you look at this, you'll see that we took this revenue reduction very seriously, trying to protect the core academic mission while still serving the large population that we sit in. We do want to say that we have a positive outlook, and there are things that we are going to continue to invest in. We talked about that undergraduate research, that quality enhancement program. We have to invest in distance learning to reach these communities that we're no longer physically sitting in. We really want to grow our research and double that in a 5-year time frame, and by doing that, we need to hire faculty in those disciplines related to the signature theme. And of course, with these wonderful opportunities that I mentioned before that we have ahead of us, of building out our Jupiter campus in the area of neuroscience and biotechnology, and partnering with HBOI, the newest member of Florida Atlantic University, and continuing to realize that potential that we have been given. Here are some performance indicators that we have in comparison to the other institutions that we want to bring to the forefront. We know that our freshman retention rate and our first time in college graduation rates are not the best in the system. We do want to point, though, to an upward trend in that, and do want to talk about, I don't want to be defensive about that, but I do want to talk about the expected graduation rates with the population of students that enter your institution along with what the graduation rate actually is. We want to invest in that and improve that. The board has been on a mission to do that for several years. Frank well knows that under his direction, we talked about the Boca campus becoming a traditional campus, building those things that tie the students to the institution, so those first-time in college freshmen don't transfer out of the institution to go to other parts of the system. And of course, that's not reflected in our graduation rate if they complete their degrees at other institutions, and that might be something that we want to look at. We're very successful with our AA transfers, and as you'll see in a subsequent slide, we have an enormous number of transfer students, and we have very, very good affiliations with the colleges that we share our piece of Florida with. Bachelor's degrees awarded, as you see, these goes up, and I'd like to point out that we awarded in 11-12 over 5,000 bachelor's degrees. Our FTIC class is around 1,600. So the reality is we're graduating far more students than we admit in that initial cohort, which means we're serving the transfer student very, very well, and we're serving the student who returns to college after being out of college for many years very, very well. We're increasing the percent of our degrees in STEM and want to increase that. Our master's degrees are going up as well as the percentage of degrees in the master's area, in the master's STEM area. These were goals given to all of the research institutions. As you know, we're a nascent research institution. We would like to build this over time. We feel that the service area we're in, the population we're in, the growth of the state around in our communities allows the state to have another research institution. As you see, we're going to be on an ambitious plan to increase our research expenditures, our research doctoral degrees in STEM. The professional doctor degree up there is Doctor of Nursing Practice, and that's one that just got implemented a couple of years ago, and that's why you see no history in that, but a growth in the future. We're very proud of our degrees offered to minority students and our growth over the last 5 years and our continued projected growth of degrees offered to minorities. And we do want to grow, as you heard before, our e-learning offerings. This pretty much indicates that most of the growth that we're anticipating will come through a renewed effort in distance education, and I've mentioned that a couple of times before. Also on here, if you look at the bottom of that white bar, you see our new medical school, which we expect to be fully enrolled in the next 3 years with 256 students in the 4 years of medical school, a class of 64 each year. Again, this speaks to the growth by method of instruction of increasing distance learning. We have some new proposed programs. I'd like to say that those are very preliminary and that we're going to take a very hard look at proposed programs. Discontinue programs like all the other institutions in the system. We're looking at low enrollment programs and continuing to discontinue them. Finally, on our tuition differential, we'd like to point out, as every other institution has, what our decline in general revenue has been, what our reduction that we faced this year of $24.7 million, which was 19% of our state funding. We also want to indicate that as we are one of the few institutions that received no PICO the last 2 years, and so we are building up our deferred maintenance at the institution as well as our mortgage payment to Scripps. Our tuition differential will generate $9.2 million net, and we do want to point out again that it was our expectation going forward after the legislative session that that was built into the $300 million decrease to the institutions, and that the effective cut to us will be far more than $24.7 million if not allowed to have the full tuition differential request. The tuition differential for us is $18.71 more per credit hour. We do want to point out that our institution is very popular and becoming more popular. This is the kind of interest in coming to Florida Atlantic University. Our applications for our freshman class were over 28,000. Applications for transfer at 17,000. Total of 45,000 students being interested in attending Florida Atlantic University. And again, we're so proud of our medical school in its second year of operation with over 3,500 applications. This difference in tuition will allow us to retain about 500 course sections. We do want to increase instructional support, and a lot of that is IT support, enhance our advising, replace our faculty as we have natural attrition or faculty leave for other institutions. In the last month, we lost 6 faculty to other institutions to other states in the past month. Faculty went for more competitive salaries to other states. We want to improve our graduation and retention rates, and yet we do have to take advantage of those opportunities offered us with Jupiter Science Initiative and Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. And again, with our board fully behind our new strategic plan and building those signature academic themes, we really do need that investment. I'd like to point out that it was a unanimous vote of our Finance and Audit Committee to support the 15% differential tuition. The full board voted later. It was asked to be moved off the consent agenda, and we had 2 negative votes of our trustees. Capital Improvement Trust Fund, we were asked to talk about what we would do with those funds. We did have a meeting of our committee with student representation, and our goals to use the Capital Improvement Trust Fund are to renovate our student union. Our breezeway on the Boca campus is our social gathering place for students. That needs renovation, and to work on a little bit on our Jupiter campus with some recreational field lights. So thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have.
Thank you, President Saunders. Questions? Maury?
President Saunders, one of the things that I saw in your report, that I think you're the only university. I think you're the only university that, if you look at your STEM, you're really looking for a huge increase in STEM. Can you tell me what are you doing to do that?
Well, interestingly, some of that is driven by student demand. The fact that the biotechnology companies have moved to our part of the state, that gets a tremendous amount of press. It's given students the opportunity to think of that for places they will work. I also believe that having the medical school, I think that we saw that when I was at the University of South Florida as a faculty member. Having a medical school meant that you had increased interest in undergraduate students in pursuing the sciences as they looked to that as an opportunity to go to that medical school coming out of your own institution. The growth of academic medicine in our area is again stimulating that. So I think we're partnering with the Business Development Board, partnering with the chambers to attract businesses to the region. And I think you'll see that growth in biotechnology and in the sciences is something that Palm Beach and Broward County are embracing, and our students are recognizing that.
So you are saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you offer right degrees and right partnerships and to be with right people, and then you will get higher STEM students attending the university.
Absolutely.
It's not some magic, let's throw a bunch of money at it and maybe we'll get some more STEM students.
Well, there is an expense, obviously. It is more expensive to offer science classes than it is, and engineering classes, than it is to offer just a lecture class because of the laboratories, the experiences you want the students to have in research. We recently invested in moving faculty up to the Jupiter campus to build that neuroscience core there. And one of the goals there is not only to have that graduate education there, attract the undergraduates, give that as a focus for our honors college, which is on that campus, but also allow that to attract more federal funding as you get those partnerships.
Well, but you're fast and furious moving towards to become number 2 in a state in a STEM graduation.
That would be wonderful.
And that's what you have in the next 3 years. You're going to be at 23%, something like that.
I think that's achievable.
Okay. Thank you.
Norm. Oh.
I guess I have to ask a question. Staying with tuition, could you tell me, if you don't get a tuition increase, what you're going to cancel? Because I assume you know in your budget that if that revenue doesn't come, what you're going to cut out. Could you tell us today what it is you're going to cut out if you don't get a tuition increase?
Well, I think that was the bottom of that differential slide. We would absolutely have to cancel about 500 class sections.
Can you go back to that slide? It was
Sure.
recently. I wanted to go back to that.
The bottom there. We would have to stop doing our faculty hiring. I believe that we would not be able to invest in the things we're investing in for improving our graduation rates. And I want to say we're not doing that just on the student tuition and on the gifts, the allotments from the state. We actively go out and pursue federal funding to help our students improve. We got a $5 million Title III grant for at-risk students for that transition from sophomore to junior year, where we also lose students. They might have done well in the gen ed courses in the first 2 years, but then how do they choose a major? How do they get into upper division classes? So these are the things that will be negatively impacted. We already have a proportion of our students of which we don't get state subsidy for. We feel very strongly that we have a demand to come to the university, that we are admitting students that we only collect the tuition from, that we don't actually get state subsidy for those particular students, and we feel it's part of our obligation to serve the students in our community with the demand we have for access to FAU at this time.
Before we go to the next board member, I did want to mention that Governor Frost is on the phone. And Pat, if you have a question at any time, just cough or something.
Thank you very much. I must say I did enjoy that presentation. I want to commend FAU and its faculty and its president. You're doing a great job. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thanks. I'm glad you were invited to speak.
Governor.
And I'm specifically looking at your medical school area too, and I think you're doing just great with it, and your involvement with the local community like Scripps, etc., is a compliment. And I can tell you all that I'm slightly involved with Scripps, and they have a lot of respect for you and your staff and what you're doing now.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Governor.
President Saunders, I'm impressed by the goal of doubling research funding over 5 years. I just wonder whether that in any way is realistic, even if you had the money to hire enough faculty members to do that, whether the national federal funding situation for research could possibly support that. Want to talk about that goal and how realistic it is?
The board presented me with that goal, and I believe in it, and I believe it's achievable. That's about a 15% increase per year, which leads to doubling in 5 years. And we're 1 year into this, and we have exceeded that 15%. I have a new vice president for research who is also my dean of the graduate school. I have a new provost who comes from a Research One institution. I believe that we can do this with strategic hires. I believe by having signature themes of having the opportunities for interdisciplinary work, that bringing those faculty together, bringing perhaps some faculty who are not as research active in team kinds of approach to grant writing is important. We will be hiring new faculty at our medical school. We're just in the second year of that medical school. We anticipate that every person hired is a research active faculty member. We have the great fortune of sitting in a very philanthropic community. We have 21 eminent scholar positions at our university, and some of these are at a point where the person who had filled that position is in a retirement age or is facing retirement. So we do have the opportunity with those eminent scholar positions to bring in people who are coming with research grants. The Jupiter Initiative, we believe we're hiring key faculty to go there. The provost has invested in strategic hiring so that we bring in mid-career people who will come to us with research funding. We feel that the community we sit in, there are lots of opportunities with our partnerships that haven't been exploited or explored before that we can do so now. This is a place where we've got talented faculty. We anticipate hiring faculty strategically in order to do so, and I'm confident that we can meet that goal.
I like aspirational goals, so
Thank
I'm
you.
all for it. And I think that Jupiter certainly gives you some opportunities if you figure out how to better integrate that with your sciences. So
I'll give you an example. We have, as the university, under the direction of Frank Brogan, acquired Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. That also has a foundation associated with it. We have a new director of that, Margaret Leinen, who was head of all of geoscience at the National Science Foundation, came to us in that position. She just finished her strategic plan, which is hiring in key areas, and that foundation has vowed to come up with significant support for the startup funds needed for hiring those faculty. So that's a place where 3 faculty hires in a very short period of time can have a big impact on our research endeavor. We just heard last week one of our faculty in the medical school, Joe Oshlander, partnering with one of our eminent scholars in the College of Nursing, Dr. Ruth Tappan, just got a $1.8 million NIH grant looking at the effect of keeping Alzheimer's patients in nursing homes versus hospitalization. So there's an example of a great one that's focused to our community with our older community in Palm Beach and Broward, taking advantage of the well-established and well-regarded College of Nursing that we have, and going forward in a collaborative project and getting NIH funding. That project was one that the university invested some of our discretionary money years ago in, probably 2 to 3 years ago, to build up the database, build up the initial research to be competitive to go federally. So that, I think, is a great example of using funding that you have, allowing that research to flourish across colleges, and then being attractive to federal funding.
thanks.
Thank you.
I had a few comments. The first is I noted that there's a proposed PhD in civil engineering. There's 6 other schools that are competing for that, and I suspect we'll be talking about that in September. This isn't a real concrete observation, but I really liked your strategies for success and your commitment to undergraduate increased performance and focusing on some of the issues that we've been talking about for the last 2 days. But then I get to your key initiatives and investments, and it's focusing on your designation as a very high research institute as the #1 key initiative. So there seems to be, I feel, a little disconnect, and I'm sure it's explainable. But I hope that you don't forget about, your commitment to the undergraduate experience and the region that you serve, the students that you serve, working at serving them better. And so I wish that was more emphasized in the material that we have, is all I'll say.
Okay.
And those are my only observations.
I appreciate that. I think that what we have been talking to our faculty about and what we see is that what we have to emphasize at FAU to remain competitive in our market, we have 3 very, very large former community colleges that are now state colleges. We have to say, what is a university education? And to me and my provost and my board, the university education means that your faculty are scholars, that they're research active. That is not exclusive of undergraduate education. That is deeply embedded in undergraduate education. Those faculty come in, they are teaching in the undergraduate curriculum. They are allowing the undergraduates to work with them on research projects. They're getting that connection between them and the life of the mind that's so important at a university. So some of our emphasis is that kind of focus, that we need to say this is a university, not a state college in our area. What is a student getting, an undergraduate who comes to the university versus going to the state college? for perhaps a degree that's labeled the same, but we want to say that our quality is superior because of the fact that the students will get opportunities to work with research active faculty and to make that be a standard for our faculty. So it may have seemed a little disconnect, but I think to those of us who work in universities, we understand that those are not two separate enterprises, but that they're intimately related. About the PhD in civil engineering, that's something that's being explored. I agree with you. If we went forward with it, we would have to be looking at it in a marine focus. And there are many opportunities about civil engineering that look at things like ports, that look at that kind of coastal infrastructure, that look at the opportunities offshore. So that would be what we would be looking at if we went forward with civil engineering.
Okay, so your opinion is these research programs will be driving, will in turn drive your academic quality. It'll bring in a better student that'll graduate faster and so forth. So there's going to be an effect at the undergraduate level.
I absolutely believe that.
Okay.
I think we want to think that the research active faculty are not the best in the classroom, but the people who are research active have that kind of excitement, have that connection to their discipline, and they absolutely translate that to students in the classroom.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes?
Thanks, Rick.
I guess, President Saunders, I'd like to follow up on something that I guess that John was alluding to, because I think that is part of the issue with FAU that becomes tough, because I do think it's a little bit, schizophrenic kind of comes to mind, but that's not a fair word. But I think that on the one hand, I see it having to serve this, kind of part-time student who is having this great opportunity because this branch is near me. And I see the other side trying, as if it's, competing with the traditional kind of University of Florida's of the world with this research. And I think it becomes difficult to, to serve both of those well. And so I guess I am interested, and I know you just responded to John, but I just kind of wanted to reiterate that. And then I have a different question as it relates to kind of what happens if you don't get the 15%, and kind of what happens if you can't offer these 500 course sections? Is it that, can you just, and that's the one I'm particularly interested in. So if you can't offer, 500 is a lot to me, so if you can't offer 500 course sections because you don't get the 15%, how are you going to remedy that issue?
Well, there will be no remedy. I mean, the absolute answer is that they won't be on the books, they won't be offered. Students will struggle to find other courses that will allow them to progress toward their degree. And it will be more difficult, absolutely. To put it in context, we offer about 5,000 course sections in the fall, about 5,000 in the spring, about 2,500 in the summer. So that's about 10% of the offerings would be affected.
I have one other question. I know earlier today, I don't know if you were in the room, when Tico talked about a presentation he's going to do tomorrow, wherein students who are below a certain income level, would in fact qualify for a lot of aid. I think it was before that's the $40,000 level and below. How would that impact your students? Because I'm interested in, and pardon me for not knowing the answer to this, I don't know whether your part-time students would actually qualify for all the dollars that Tico may be talking about in that lower category of $40,000 and below.
Well, there is aid available for part-time students as well as full-time students. Okay. If I could go back to your initial question about, what universities do with the different populations of students. We all serve many different populations of students, and I think you're right. If you look at a traditional four-year liberal arts college, they serve pretty much the same student, from freshman year to graduation. When you look at a complex, comprehensive university like we are, we serve a medical school student. That is very different. We serve a PhD student in the sciences, which is different. We serve a transfer student coming into the nursing program. That's different. We have students that come in and take courses and maybe on a 20-year path to an undergraduate degree, a 10-year path. We have people who drop in and drop out because of financial reasons. So we see one of the things that will help us with our revenue model and our stability as an institution is to have some growth in that traditional four-year student. We offer more upper division than most of the other institutions. Back in the history, it's been more than half the life of the institution, but it started as upper division. Because of all of our transfer students coming in, we offer those more expensive upper division courses and graduate courses. So really, as part of our model to get affinity to the institution, we have expanded our opportunities for first-time, full-time college freshmen. We've done that by building the dormitories on campus, increasing student life. We believe that will help us with our alumni support of the institution. But it also is part of a revenue model that says the most expensive student really are those upper division part-time students who are taking more expensive instruction and yet don't have some of that loyalty to the institution that might translate into giving later. So it is a blended model, and the sector that we want to grow is really that traditional age student, and we're seeing much more interest in that, I believe, because of the investment we've made in building Boca as a traditional campus. It doesn't mean you'll move away from serving those other students well, as we have been if you look at our graduation, but it will increase that particular part of the sector that we feel we have a commitment to. So rather than a student coming and wanting to transfer to a Florida State, a Central Florida, we're hoping to keep them on campus. And that's part of a strategy that then we have that student for 4 years.
President Saunders, thank you. Governor Perez.
Mr. Chair, with the exception of the 2012-2013 tuition differential and capital improvement trust funds fees requested, which we'll deal with at the Budget and Finance Committee meeting tomorrow, I move we approve the university, the Florida Atlantic University's university work plan associated with the 2012-2013 academic year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Governor Frost? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Governor Frost, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry I'm not there in person. I have a terrible, terrible cold. I just want to give it to everyone. Thank you.
When are we coming back?
Yeah,
12:45.
Okay. We are ahead of schedule. And
I was afraid I had one of those coming up too from the
do we want to try to come back for a few? Or why don't we plan on coming back instead of 12:45, coming back at 12:30, and we'll adjourn for lunch. Thank you.